Hey folks, welcome to 2021 as we turn to our new series where we look at port adventures. And this one's a little bit different. We recorded it before we brought this plan together, but in the future you'll see we'll maintain a similar format where we'll take a look at what Disney Cruise Line has to offer, and then we'll talk to our guests as far as what they experienced when they were in the different ports. But because we recorded this one earlier in 2020, it's going to be a little bit different, but I think you're going to enjoy it as well. I'd like to once again welcome Lauren back to our show, and she is going to talk about her and her husband's trip adventures up in Alaska. So thanks for joining us in 2021. We're happy you're back with us, and now, as they say, on with the show. Well, hello, and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you and your family cruise a little smarter when the ship starts sailing. And I'd like to welcome back to our show our co-host from Los Angeles. How you doing this morning, Chris?
Doing good, Steve. How about you?
Not too bad. You were out running this morning already. I feel lazy. All I've done is gotten up and had some coffee.
Well, it is going to be 110 degrees in Los Angeles this weekend. There's no way I'm going to get a long run in when it's like 80 degrees by 5 a.m. So instead, I decided to get some running in when it's not so hot.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we're going to keep it West Coast. Our guest today is also on the West Coast, and I'd like to welcome back to the show today, Lauren from California. How are you doing today, Lauren?
Hi, great. Good to be with you guys again.
Thanks for coming back. And without the ship sailing, it's been kind of interesting to try and come up with some different topics. And so one of the things I think that people really enjoy talking about, or have always asked us to talk about, is different port adventures. And it's kind of a tough topic to talk about because everybody's a little bit different in what works best for them and their family and what they want to do on their ships. But I think Alaska is an amazing place, one of those bucket list cruises. I'm really glad you reached out to talk about yours, Lauren.
I'm super excited. Alaska was definitely on our bucket list, and we got to do that.
And Chris, I'm not sure if you got to listen to Lauren's first episode we did, but we compared the east and westbound transatlantics. And I know that you and your husband are like those longer cruises, but we're actually going to talk about a short cruise this time.
Well, shorter anyway, 7 whole days.
So when, before we jump into the port adventures themselves, kind of give everybody a background as to your kind of cruising history and then why you went on this cruise and when you went.
Sure. So Jason grew up in a Disney family, went to the Disney parks, enjoyed Disney stuff. I did not. I had seen a couple of Disney films, and that was the extent of anything I knew about Disney. And when we got married, Jason eventually convinced me to go spend one day in Disneyland. And I went kicking and screaming. I didn't want to go. I thought it was just for kids, and I was absolutely going to hate it. 20 minutes in, I was in love, and I absolutely loved Disney. And we basically became people who went to the parks all the time. We had gone to Walt Disney World. We spent lots of time in Disneyland. We even made it out to Japan and went to the Tokyo parks. And we were looking for something different to do. We kind of thought we might want to stay with Disney. We were really enjoying sort of doing some of our vacationing with them and look to see what they had to offer. And cruising came up, and we knew we would hate cruising. We didn't think there was anything about it we were going to enjoy, and we never wanted to go on a cruise ever. But Alaska looked really cool. We kind of looked at how to go to Alaska, and the easiest way is a cruise. We thought, well, if we're going to go to Alaska and we're going to do a cruise, we might as well do it with Disney, because if we have to cruise, Disney will at least make it a bearable experience. And that's how we went on this cruise to Alaska. And this was supposed to be our one and only never cruise again cruise to Alaska.
Spoiler alert. That was not what happened.
I kind of want to go back to what was it about the 20 minutes in Disneyland that changed your mind? Was it the ambiance of the place? What hit you about it?
I wish I could tell you. I think it was all of it. Jason was a smart man and took me on a super awesome first ride, because I literally went into Disneyland not knowing anything about it. I looked at a list of rides the night before we went. I knew absolutely nothing.
So what was that first ride?
Indiana Jones. So I think from somebody who, likes what I would have thought of as like amusement parks, roller coasters, going in Indiana Jones, which is a little more adventurous ride, and the theming and the music and the setup and the queue and all of it, I was in. I was 100% in after that ride and could not get enough Disney at that point, which I think made Jason very happy.
Chris, did you go kicking and screaming the first time you went to Disneyland?
Well, no, because I love Disneyland, but I did go kicking and screaming onto certain rides. I distinctly remember being terrified as a kid of the topiaries outside of Small World. Like, I thought that it meant there were, like, dangerous animals in there that we would encounter. So I literally screamed and cried that it was too scary. And then we went in and it was just dancing dolls. And I was like, that was okay. That wasn't so bad. So some of the rides did scare me when I was a kid. But I think you're absolutely right that Indiana Jones is a good gateway ride because it shows people what the mixture of like thrill and technology does, and in a way that only Disney can do. So I feel like that would be a very good first ride for you.
It was. I don't know if I had gone on something like Autotopia, if I would have been so excited to become sort of a Disney fan, but once we went to the parks, I became sort of the Disney aficionado of the two of us. I have dived into the history, the design of the parks. Like, I do a lot of the planning for our trips now, and I don't think Jason knew what he was starting when he took me to Disneyland for one day only.
Well, also, to Disney's credit, they do spray those sort of like Disney pheromones on Main Street, so you really didn't have a chance. They were going to get you.
No, it's true.
Well, let's turn to your cruise up to Alaska. You take the step to go up there. Did you look at any of the other cruise lines? Did you compare it at all as to what they did versus what the Wonder does up there?
Really briefly, in all honesty, we didn't want to cruise, and we have friends and family who have cruised, and we've heard all about it, and we knew we were going to hate it. And so we figured, we knew we at least liked Disney, and if we were going to cruise, we might as well just go with Disney and at least have a mildly pleasant experience on the ship. Our real goal was kind of to see Alaska in a semi-convenient way, honestly.
No, that totally makes sense. It is a great way to be able to see Alaska. So I'm assuming that this was the normal, typical 7-day, which left out of Vancouver. You get that first day up towards Alaska, then you end up going up towards the glacier, then you come back hitting Skagway, Juneau, Ketchikan, and then back to Vancouver?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the standard itinerary.
Okay, so with that being said, what did you guys do, or how did you guys do the research as to what you wanted to see and what you wanted to do in each one of the ports before you left?
So first, I started off looking at what Disney had to offer. I had no idea. I mean, honestly, I knew nothing about cruising. I had to learn about what port adventures were and how long you were off the ship, and if you had to go with the stuff on the ship, their offered adventures or not, and sort of learned, that no, you didn't have to go with them. And so we sort of broke it down by port. We ended up sort of looking at what Disney had to offer and decided for the most part we were going to go with Disney. As first-time cruisers, we felt a little more comfortable since we didn't know how it all worked exactly, doing most of our port adventures through Disney. And also because of the types of port adventures we ended up choosing, it made us a little more comfortable as well. So what we did was we broke down each port, so we had 3, and we printed out any of the types of port adventures that Disney had. This ended up being 30 pages of information.
Wow.
This was absolutely ridiculous. But we sort of laid it out. And our problem was we sort of had some ideas of what we wanted to do. But ports like Juneau, Ketchikan, and Skagway sometimes offer really similar port excursions. And we were trying to compare, well, if we did this one in Skagway, would it be better to do this one in Juneau? But if Juneau offers this one, would it be better to do this one in Ketchikan? And it was like a shell game for us trying to figure it out. It's never been as difficult for any of our other cruises. I'm sure part of it was the learning curve for us, but it definitely was an intense process of really comparing and contrasting and trying to figure out optimal strategies. We felt like we were the first-time cruisers, so everything we wanted to do, we assumed was super popular and everybody would want to do. And we would not get any of those first choices. So we had ranked everything for each port by like first, second, third, fourth choices.
That's a really good point. I think a lot of people do that. That's a great place to start for people when they're looking for port adventures, is to go on Disney's website and take a look and see what they have to offer. I've actually gone to Like Alaska, Holland America does a lot, and so I've gone to their website as well just to see what they offer. A lot of them are going to be very similar, but I think that's a good place for people to start. Also, I think what you did as well, as far as ranking, having different options, especially if you're a new cruiser and don't get to book initially or as early as some of the Gold and the Platinum Castaway members. Having a couple different ideas as to what you want to do, I think that was a really good idea as well. Chris, what did you guys use when you went to Alaska?
Okay, so Alaska is a little bit weird compared to the Caribbean, because in the Caribbean, you could book all of your cruises or all your excursions outside of Disney, like if you wanted. You could go online and all these ports, except for obviously Castaway, you can find port adventures that are not booked through Disney. There's any number of reasons why you should book port adventures through them, like, convenience. You might be able to get off the ship before everyone else, or they'll never leave you if you get back late. But we found that in Alaska, you literally could not book excursions in some ports if you didn't book through your cruise line. So I'll give you an example. There's a town called Hoonah, which is often referred to as Icy Strait Point, and you literally cannot book excursions there unless you book through the cruise line. There's no excursions available online. So we mostly went through the cruise line for our excursions. Though in Juneau and in some of the other cities, you can find excursions that are not with your cruise line. I would warn you against assuming that you'll always be able to book later or outside of your outside of Disney, because actually there's a lot of excursions that you literally can only do with Disney.
And as we get into it, I think I don't want to ruin your ability to tell everybody what you did, Lauren, but I think because of the excursions you picked, I would feel a lot more comfortable booking them through Disney so that you don't miss that ship when it sails. So
that was honestly, that's sort of where we ended up. Two of the excursions we did book, you could have possibly booked outside of Disney, but we felt much more comfortable booking through Disney when we decided and got the excursions that we wanted to do, and we're actually able to book them.
Yeah, anytime you're taking another boat or a plane or something like that, where you have to count on that to get you back to the port, I think, for me and our family, I think we'd feel more comfortable having that, the knowledge that the ship's got to kind of wait for you if something happens. So before we jump into Alaska itself, you guys leave out of Vancouver. What did you guys do, or what did you have planned in Vancouver? Did you find anything there to do?
Sure. So if our travel time allows it, we always like to treat the city that we're leaving out of as a port day. And so we flew into Vancouver the night before our cruise, afternoon, really. We didn't have a lot of time to see stuff in Vancouver. And so we picked two sort of, fun things to do. We went and did the Flyover Canada, which if people haven't heard about it, it's literally located right next to the port. You could see the ships from the entrance to it. And it's basically a Soarin' version of Canada. And so we did that, and that was really fun. And we also took a cab out to Granville Island Market, which is a little island that's off of Vancouver, the main area. And it's shopping and art stores and artists. And it has a great, what I kind of described as European-esque food market, stalls and bakeries and all sorts of stuff. And so we went out there and had dinner and just walked around and enjoyed the evening.
Granville Market, Granville Island. That's a beautiful place. We did that before our cruise as well down there. Like you said, there's food there for everybody, and just an amazing place. So that flight over Canada, did they instead of having the orange groves, or what do they have now? I don't even know. Soaring over the world, they've got some other different smells. Did they have smells associated with it too?
They did. The only one I remember for sure is the scent of forest, because you're flying over the rural part of Canada. But it's about a 20-minute experience top to bottom. Around when we did it, it was about $20 a person. So it's not inexpensive, but we figured we didn't know if we'd ever come back to Vancouver. And it was one of those things that, wow, if we could go on a ride outside of a Disney park, that seemed pretty cool and a nice way to spend the evening. And it's open really late. I think the last showings, I don't know what to call, boarding times were between 10 and 11 p.m. So it wasn't something you had to cram in, as soon as you got there before, it closed at 5. So it was something really easy to do later in the evening for us.
Well, so Vancouver's kind of an iconic sail away, at least I think so, leaving out of the bay or the port there, and you go underneath. And I've got to look up the name of the bridge, but it's a huge bridge. It reminds me kind of the Golden Gate Bridge as you leave Vancouver and then start making your way up towards Alaska and the Inside Passage. Could you talk a little bit about what it was like to sail up through Alaska and the Inside Passage, Lauren?
Sure. I've got I think is a really funny story. We were obviously there the night before, and you can go walk. We were staying right down by the cruise port, and you can go walk and see all the ships. And so we thought, oh, this will be fun. We'll go check out the ships. We knew the Disney Wonder wasn't in port, but we've never seen a cruise ship. And so we walked by, and we walked past this ship that was massive. I mean, we thought we were walking past a city. It was huge. It was just went on forever. And we were like, man, we're so glad that the Disney Wonder is a really small ship. We'll feel a little bit more at home at that. Turns out the Disney Wonder is 140 feet longer than the ship we first saw. So what we thought of as small was not. So we were blown away when we got to see the Wonder that morning and board. We were not prepared for how big it was. I don't know what we had in our minds what a cruise ship is like, but whatever it was, this was 10 times bigger. And so for us, just boarding and getting on the ship and, doing the sail away, everything was huge, and it was magical, and it was wonderful, and it was Disney, and it was everything, you would expect from a Disney sail away. And then we went to dinner. And so we actually had early dining on this cruise. And so I don't remember spending that much time enjoying the views of the actual sail away as you leave Vancouver, because we basically sailed away and then had to go get ready for our seating.
That's one of the things that you're going to have to finally come to terms with, Chris, when you and Seth finally adopt. That early dinner and the fact that as soon as you
I don't know if I'll be able to give up my late night dining. I think I probably will, though. I get the sacrificing for the children. Do you all have kids?
We do not. We are a party of 2.
Oh, but you like the early hour of the dining.
We don't like the early hour, but we don't like the late hour either. If there was something in the middle, I would take that. But I mean, in Alaska, I think dinner started at 8:15. I am not interested in still eating my dinner at 9:30 at night, honestly. And I think I'm trying to remember, I think our dinner was like at 5:45. And so I want like a 7 p.m. But since they don't offer it, we go earlier and later and figure if we're still hungry, there's plenty of stuff to munch on the deck.
That's kind of a good and bad as far as, having the later dinner in Alaska, because some of the port adventures get back a little bit later. So it makes it nicer that way so you don't feel so rushed. But I hear you. It gets to be a little bit late sometimes, even for us. It works good when you go to the East Coast. So when you go to the East Coast, being West Coasters like we are, that 8 o'clock is really 5 o'clock. So it's just about perfect.
Well, it also doesn't get dark. When you start going further north, it doesn't get dark till so late at night that it's like, when you're having dinner at 10 p.m. still, it's like sunny out.
Well, let's turn to the port adventures themselves, Lauren. What were you guys looking to do, and what were you looking to accomplish, and what did you want to see in each one of your port adventures or as you went through Alaska?
Sure. So when we thought of Alaska, we really wanted to do what we thought of as iconic Alaska. This was our one and only cruise, probably our one and only time in Alaska. And we really wanted to do things we couldn't do other places. I know for a lot of people, dog sledding is like really top of the list for Alaska. For us, we felt like having some dogs pull a golf cart wasn't really a highlight. And it is something you can do in some of the western states in the lower 48. Same with whale watching. Whale watching is really popular in Alaska. I completely understand it. Again, it's something you can do outside of Alaska. And so we sort of turned our attention to things we felt like were very Alaska only. And so that meant glaciers. And so our goal was to kind of see as many glaciers and things that Alaska had to offer that aren't offered outside of visiting Alaska on a trip.
I know somebody else who loves glaciers.
We do love glaciers. I went to Alaska with a group of friends, and we pretended like we were David Attenborough glacier experts, but we didn't know anything about glaciers. So we would be like, the gray coloration near the bottom of the glacier is shorter. And like we would just talk about glaciers this way. But by the end of it, we were glacier experts, and we knew everything about glaciers. Also, as I have mentioned somehow on every episode, we got to go to the Hubbard Glacier, which is like Glacier Goals. And Disney doesn't go there every season. Sometimes the only time they go there is if they have a 9-night. And you went on a 7-night. I was going to ask, besides the Tracy Arm and Endicott Arm, are there any variations on Disney's cruises in terms of the 7-night itinerary?
In general, now they only go to Endicott Arm. Our cruise was a perfect example of why that ended up happening.
Right.
You can edit this out, Steve, but just like our westbound transatlantic, where they no longer take the route we took this last time, they, like, after our season of Alaska, they more or less stopped going to Tracy Arm for the same reason that we ended up not going to Tracy Arm.
And why is that?
Because of weather and ice, and Tracy Arm is often frozen over, and they can't go up Tracy Arm.
I'm going to leave that in there because
Yeah.
I think that's perfect.
So a lot of people don't know this, but when you go to a port, a pilot will come and get on your ship. And a lot of people do know that. Like, the boat pulls up next to the ship, a pilot jumps on, and then that pilot helps dock because they know that port better. But in Alaska, a pilot gets on your ship to help take you up these arms and to help take you to these glaciers, even though you're not docking. So, like, these are not things that just any admiral or captain of a ship can do without guidance, because it's very narrow passage and the ice conditions are really, really intense. So it's one of those things where it's like your cruise could be different depending on weather. Okay, so you didn't go to Tracy Arm, which I get. I think we did not go to Tracy Arm on ours either. So you went to Endicott Arm. What did you do besides see a beautiful glacier?
So 17 days before our cruise left, we saw online that Disney had opened up a brand new first time ever port adventure. And we looked at it. I literally thought about it for less than 5 minutes and clicked book. It was a mini boat that you boarded off of the Disney Wonder while you were in Endicott Arm or Tracy Arm, and you got to go much further inland and closer to the glacier than the large cruise ship can go. So that's what we decided to do. We had no intention of doing that originally, but when they offered it for the first time 17 days before our cruise, we altered our plans for our day at sea in the fjords there.
How did it work? I know, so you definitely get a great view of the glacier when you're on the Wonder. That's all we did when we went up to Tracy Arm. But to be fair, you probably need, having binoculars, or if you want to take some really good photos, you need a telephoto lens. Now, obviously, you got to get a lot closer. How was that experience?
So it was amazing. Basically, we were the guinea pigs in some senses. We were on the first ever offered, and the way they do it is they offer it twice during the day. Once leaves the ship pretty early in the time in your arm there, and you board the ship and you spend about 3.5 hours total traversing up ahead of the ship. So we were actually up to Dawes Glacier about an hour before the Disney Wonder arrived. And so we were able to get really close to land on either side as we were traversing up there. It meant we got very close to some, I guess, ice. Are they icebergs, or are they, like, I don't know, ice shelves? The little tiny floating ice pods that are off the ship. And so we got to see a baby seal laying on one of those icebergs. I don't know, is that what you call them?
Well, let's go back to David Attenborough. How would he describe it?
They are icebergs, just really small ones. In fact, they're up near Anchorage. There's a lake that is a glacial lake, and it's full of icebergs. And it's like this famous lake just because it's a lake. It's not an ocean, and it just has these icebergs melting in it, like a cup of iced tea or something. So
you basically board a ship. It's roughly, I don't know, maybe 100 people were on this. I didn't take a tally, but it's a pretty small vessel. It's 2 stories. It does have an indoor area and some outdoor areas. And so as you're cruising up Endicott Arm, you can sit inside, and they had a naturalist who was there to talk about everything you could see. You could also stand outside as you were traveling. Jason and I decided we were going to brave the wind and the cold and stand outside. We wanted to experience the kind of authentic Alaska as much as we could. And so we stood outside for, I would say, probably 2/3 of the trip up. It just got so cold, even with gloves and hat, and we had a windbreaker on. You're going, 40, 50 miles an hour on this boat, whatever it is, 10 miles an hour. I have no idea. But you're getting some wind and, kind of blowing in your face. And so it got a little bit chilly, and we did enjoy the inside. One thing I was really excited about, which I guess because it was brand new, we didn't know, they offered restrooms on the ship. And for a 4-hour journey, I was really appreciative of that fact, honestly, along with some coffee and donuts and heat. And so once you got up to Dawes Glacier, they basically pull the ship as close as they can get, which always depends, on the ice flow and the weather and the temperature and everything. And so we got really, really close. We were really lucky. The weather was great. It was mostly sunny and clear and had been warm enough that they felt like they could get pretty close. And they parked the boat, and then they open up the top deck. And you basically can go out there and stand out on the top deck for as long as you want. And I don't know if this is still the case, but for us, here's the tip. People clamored. Just like mobbed to get up there. They were up there. They took all their selfies, all their pictures. 15 minutes later, everybody was back inside the ship. And we had like 45 more minutes left at the glacier. And so we got to stand outside enjoying the glacier, and the glacier smells. There is a smell about glaciers that we would just stand there and just bask in this wonderful glacier. And it was us and one other family for over 30 minutes.
Amazing. Did you get to hear that? What was the calving like? Did you hear some? It must have been just thunderous.
So it was really interesting because everybody went back inside, and I don't know what happened in those first 15 minutes. Jason and I chose to stay on the lower deck and not fight the crowds, and figured we'd go up eventually. And once it cleared out and we were up there, we had it calved 3 times in those 30 minutes we were out there. And everybody inside the ship completely missed it because, it's loud, but it's not as loud as that you're going to hear it and experience that spray and the sound and the feeling of it if you're inside, the glass domed circled ship.
Well, what an amazing time up there along the glacier. From there, then you guys moved down to Skagway. What did you guys have planned there, and what did you end up doing?
So Skagway was the one I think we were both the most excited about. We chose to take a helicopter tour out to an actual glacier and walk around on the glacier.
Which glacier did you land on? Is it a famous glacier?
No idea.
Just a glacier.
A glacier. I'm sure I could look it up, but honestly, I have no idea.
A glacier is a glacier, and a helicopter landing on a glacier is pretty cool. I think there are multiple ports where you could have chosen to do that, though, but you specifically chose Skagway.
We did, because it sort of balanced out what we wanted to do in Juneau, and Skagway were basically the 2 ports that offered the helicopter tours for us. We wanted to do something else in Juneau, and Skagway was our other option to do it, which was how that balancing act of us laying out all the port adventure options was how we ended up deciding Skagway over Juneau. It wasn't anything specific about that glacier.
What's your highlight reel of that experience? Like, what are the things that you liked about it? Would you recommend it?
So it was my first time in a helicopter, which was teeny bit terrifying, mostly awesome. You can get really, really close to the scenery and other glaciers. The way they do it is you check in, they go through a safety demonstration. You're not allowed to take anything but basically your phone and hat and gloves and coat onto the tour. They do a weigh-in to do weight and balance for the helicopter. So, no lying about your weight there. And then they board you into your helicopters and you take off. And it's about a 25-minute flight to the glacier, and it's not a boring flight. We got to take off and fly directly over the Disney Wonder, which was a great view. And then they sort of go around and show you glaciers from the air and some of the scenery. And just the helicopter flight over would have been amazing enough. And then they land you in the middle of nowhere. This isn't a glacier that's out and there's, a cute little visitor center. There is nothing. They have a warming hut for emergencies, and 2 people staffed it that are out there for the day when you land. So you land with absolutely nothing except a giant glacier in front of you and some guides to walk you around the glacier. And so everybody piles out of the helicopter. They give you a brief sort of introduction, and then they kind of let you loose with guidance to walk around the glacier. They obviously tell you where to walk and they sort of guide you in that sense, but you're not on a single path, and you get to walk around and you get to see it and you get to smell it and you get to touch it. And this is probably, I think Jason says this was the highlight of the trip for him. We got to taste glacial water. So water straight off the glacier. They allow you to do it. It was recommended. Most people chose not to. We were like, stick our hands in that. It was amazing. There is nothing. The color, we call it glacial blue. There is nothing like the blue on a glacier. And even in our pictures, we would take a picture, look at it, and be like, no, that didn't capture it. There was nothing like being on that glacier and just experiencing being in the middle of nowhere on a giant piece of ice that's been there forever.
So we did the same thing, and I didn't want to jump into it yet because we did that in Juneau, but I remember tasting the glacial water like that, and it was amazing. We didn't have as much time on the glacier as you guys did, but our whole family went on up there, and that was probably still one of our favorite trips that we've done. Like you said, just the scenery that you got to see going up to the glacier itself, and then having our picture up there is just kind of a memorable moment. So I'm glad you guys had as good of an experience as we did.
Yeah, we were out on the glacier for about 55 minutes to an hour by the time you loaded into the helicopter. And it's about a 20-minute ride each way on the helicopter. And it is expensive. I'll be honest. This is not one of those inexpensive port adventures. But 100%, I would do it again, and I would pay the money to do it again. It was worth every penny to experience that. And it is literally something, if you ask us about Alaska, what was your favorite part? Going on the glacier is probably one of the first things we're going to tell you about.
So let's move on to Juneau, the capital of Alaska. I'm really excited to hear about this because we went to the Taku Glacier, which is one of the little trivia there for you. It's one of the few glaciers that's actually growing in the world and not receding. So talk about what you did there in Juneau, Lauren.
Again, we decided we wanted to do things that we couldn't do outside of Alaska, and it sort of lended us to look at a seaplane. I guess flight plane is not the right word. Float plane, thank you. A float plane tour of the area around Juneau and the glaciers again. And then we landed at something called Taku Glacier Lodge. And this is a lodge that is, again, in the middle of absolutely nowhere. There are no roads to it. There is a waterway that you could take a boat and you can land on a seaplane or a float plane out there. And so you get to fly out. You get the views, again, were amazing. You're in, I think it was 8 to 12 seater plane. I don't remember exactly. So it's a small plane. It's a prop plane. And you get to fly out, get really kind of low over the scenery, get just amazing views of a couple of different glaciers. They call it I think it's a 5 glacier tour. So they show you a bunch of glaciers. Honestly, it's not like there's a GPS that tells you which one is which. So I don't know what we saw, but the views were amazing. And then you get to land on this sort of waterway right up front of the lodge, and you pull up to a little dock and you get off. And then you get to spend a couple of hours out at this lodge having lunch and exploring. And you're right across from Hole in the Wall Glacier, which is really stunning. And it's not one that gets a lot of news, but it's so close to Taku Glacier Lodge. It was probably only slightly further than we got on that boat that went to the Dawes Glacier back in Endicott Arm. We were really, really close, and you could kind of really experience it and see it, which was great. And then they offer a typical Alaskan rustic lunch. So they grill fresh caught salmon right out on the grill outside, and they do cornbread and they do lemonade, which you go, oh yeah, whatever, lemonade, except they make it with ice they chipped off of the glacier that morning. So you're, again, getting to taste glacial ice in this lemonade. One of the things that you can do is hike. There's some trails and waterfalls, and it's just an amazing experience. It's really rural. I mean, it sounds funny, but Alaska, when you're inside of Juneau, although it's Alaska, it feels like a pretty typical city with some cool views in the background. But this was in the middle of nowhere. I'll never forget when we got there. They gave us a introductory lecture, which is pretty typical. This one included how to use the toilets. That was the lecture was needed, by the way. Absolutely. I would have never figured out how to use those toilets without an instructional class, because it is a remote outpost, and so they don't have your typical plumbing and infrastructure. One of the things that I'll never forget, though, was you get to the island, and in an introduction, they say, here is the bug repellent table. Please feel free to use it. And you kind of snicker. until you've seen the size of the mosquitoes out at Taku Glacier Lodge, and then you cover yourself in that stuff. I've honestly never seen a mosquito that big before. They were huge. Like, you would swat at them and you could feel them hit your hand when you just swatted in the air. They were the biggest bugs. I mean, hummingbird size practically. That's probably the only downside of Taku Glacier is, at least when we went, we were just surrounded by mosquitoes anytime we were outside, which, I mean, we never got bit with the bug spray, but you would have to walk through clouds of them to see anything on the island. Or I guess not island, but outpost.
That's an interesting thing I've never considered. I guess because it's so cold in Alaska, I don't think of it as being mosquitoed. And certainly I wouldn't have considered mosquitoes being a risk going to a glacier. But there you go. That's a good tip. And at least they provide bug repellent, because I bet you most people going on that tour are not thinking, ooh, I better bring some bug repellent.
It's true. One of the things that's really cool about Taku Glacier is they have a really often occurrence of bears. They don't guarantee you're going to see a bear. There's no promises. This is not a bear sightseeing excursion, but they say 70% of the time. And we were there 3 hours, and 15 minutes before it was time for us to leave, 2 bears showed up to lunch. And so they are not particularly scared, frankly, and they were really, really close. They were close enough that the staff is out there with giant sticks trying to keep them away from the grilled salmon and the visitors.
Well, that's amazing that you guys got to see them before. It worked out just before you left. How was the salmon? I know a lot of people that we talk to are not seafood fans. Are you a seafood fan, and what did you think?
I'm a vegetarian.
Okay.
But Jason, to be fair, they did a really good job. As a vegetarian, there were options. I was not left eating nothing at all. I mean, I went for the experience. The food was secondary, and the food ended up being really, really good. We even had a vegan on our port adventure, and even she did okay. It looked like they were able to provide at least something. Jason loved the salmon. He says it's some of the best he's ever had. It's obviously fresh caught. It's Alaskan salmon from the source. This has not been shipped in or, pre-frozen. They usually catch it the day of or the day before, from what they told us. And so he said it was some of the best salmon he's ever had. So that's what I can tell you about the salmon, but I don't honestly know. But the lemonade was top notch.
Perfect. Chris, I don't even know. Are you a seafood fan? I'm not even sure I remember.
Yeah. I like fish. I do not like crab or slimy things, such as like octopus or squid, but fish is great. Had halibut for dinner last night.
I love halibut, and especially if it's fresh.
So good.
Yeah. So you fly back to Juneau, board back on board the Wonder, and head down to your last port of Ketchikan. What did you guys have planned there?
So Ketchikan, we decided we were going to go out on our own. One of the things that's in Ketchikan that a lot of people may not realize is Alaska has rainforests. And we really wanted to see the Alaskan rainforest. Disney does do some port adventures. They're a little more, I'm trying to think of the right word. They're a little more family friendly, and we really wanted to get out in kind of the rustic rainforest and sort of experience it at its purity. And so we decided we were going to hike a trail out through the rainforest that takes off just outside of Ketchikan.
And how did you pick that trail? Did you use a guide, or did you just do some research on Ketchikan itself as far as what was nearby?
So I did a lot of research online and found out about this trail. It's called Deer Mountain Trail, and the head of the trail is about a mile outside of Ketchikan. There is a road that you can walk up to it. It's a hilly road. There's no sidewalks, but it's not particularly highly traveled by cars. And as long as you're careful, and I would say maybe with all adults, it wasn't too bad. Otherwise, you could take a taxi up to the trailhead. And this is what's considered a rustic trail. I think in hindsight, I did not realize what Alaskan rustic meant to the rest of the world. But we decided we were going to hike up here. One thing we did do is the Ketchikan Visitor Center offers free locator beacons. And I would highly recommend doing this if you're doing anything outside of the kind of the town of Ketchikan on your own. Basically, you go in, you fill out a piece of paper that says where you're going, how long you're going to be gone, and when you expect to arrive back. And then you check out a locator beacon. They're free. You have to return them at the end of the day. But it basically allows, if anything happens, for the authorities to hopefully be able to find you. And even though we were on a trail, we were out in a pretty remote area of Ketchikan in Alaska. And if something had happened, it definitely would have been helpful for authorities to be able to, we hit our button and be able to find us easily. So I highly recommend if you're going to be doing any hiking, because there are a lot of trails around Ketchikan. You're in, pronounce it right, Tungus National Forest area. And so you can go exploring quite a bit on your own, but I would definitely recommend having that beacon checked out.
Well, that's a good safety tip there, because you definitely don't get cell phone coverage everywhere up there once you leave outside of the cities. Well, as we kind of wrap things up today, Lauren, looking back at your trip to Alaska, is there anything else that you miss or that we missed talking about, or any advice you would give to others who are looking to sail to Alaska next year and thinking about the port adventures that they're going to experience?
Sure, I have a couple. One I'm going to kind of tell you about Ketchikan. So on this Deer Mountain Trail, I do want to say that it is extremely steep and extremely rustic, and I was not prepared for that. We thought we were going to walk up to the summit, which is about a 3-mile hike. After an hour, I thought we had walked forever and we hadn't seen any mile markers, and it was basically like summiting Everest in mud. And we had made it barely a mile. And so although the views were great and being inside of the rainforest was absolutely outstanding, this is not something for new hikers or maybe families with kids. I was not fully prepared. And I think people who are hikers or walkers or campers, when you think of what you've done in the lower 48, ratchet it up a lot in Alaska. Because their standards are just not the same as what I would have expected on a rustic trail. This was way more rustic and way more brief of services. I mean, the trail was sometimes a foot wide in a mud strip that we walked through.
It sounds like you really knew what you wanted going in. You were a planner and you got to do everything that you wanted. I, like you, do recommend picking a port and not doing an excursion in that port, going on your own and winging it, because we did that in Juneau, but we did stuff in Juneau that I've never even heard anybody doing. We got to do stuff that's not a port adventure, that's just completely on our own, and we basically felt like we were little explorers, and it was great. So I think your idea for Ketchikan is something that on almost any longer cruise, picking a day where you don't book a bunch of excursions and you just sort of go out on your own, I think is a good advice and a fun little winging it adventure style thing.
One other thing with Alaska, I know there's a lot of debate over the veranda, no veranda question with Alaska. And Jason and I approached it, I guess, a little differently than a lot of people do. I know there's a ton of opinions that say if you're going to Alaska, veranda or don't go. And we looked at the prices for verandas, almost fell over, and then decided we were going to do an inside cabin, which I know for a lot of people is, I don't know how you're going to do Alaska with an inside cabin. But what it allowed us in our budgeting was to be able to do all of these amazing port adventures. We were off the ship and seeing a lot of great stuff. And honestly, for the times that we were on the ship, traveling between stuff, it was really easy to go out to any of the public decks on deck 4 or deck 9 or 10 and see what was going on and experience traveling through that inner passage. But I would highly recommend, I think if we did it again, we would do another inside cabin just for the fact that it gave us a lot more budget wiggle room to be able to book some of the most amazing port adventures, even with all the other cruises we've done that we talk about constantly, because Alaska is just everything everybody says it is.
Good advice there. I think that we were in an inside cabin as well, which allowed us to do our helicopter tour. And like you said, we're the type of family that's out and about of the ship all the time. So when you're out moving around, there's just so many different ways to view the scenery as you're going by. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for coming on and sharing your experiences, your thoughts about port adventures in Alaska. And I know the ships aren't sailing right now, and you're kind of secretive as to what you guys have planned next, but I'm going to throw it out there anyways. Do you guys have anything planned in the future? You don't have to tell us, but I'm sure it's going to be something long again.
We do. I think I've told you before, we never leave a ship without a placeholder or a cruise booked. We do have something in the works we're super excited about. I think if it happens, everything is up in the air these days, but if it happens, it will be our most epic adventure yet. So we're super excited about it.
Well, there you go, folks. You'll have to tune back
Mysteries. Well, it'll be fun to have you on to hear about that one day.
Definitely. Well, let's keep our fingers crossed for all of us to get back on the ships. And thank you so much for coming back on, Lauren. And we wish you guys the best as we're kind of moving through these times. And we can't wait to hear you come back on and tell us what you guys did.
Thanks for continuing with the show. Even when we're not traveling, it's a great way to experience other people's trips and keep us in that happy travel mode.
Definitely. Well, thanks again, Lauren. All the best, and we'll talk to you soon. Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank Lauren for coming on and sharing her and her husband's amazing experiences in Alaska with Disney Cruise Line. And as we roll into 2021, watch for more of these port adventure shows. We're going to focus on return to cruising. Hopefully it's going to happen in 2021. We'll keep our fingers crossed. We'll see how it goes. Those vaccines are starting to move out there, and we'll just see what happens with the CDC and the cruise lines. But we wanted to focus on some fun in the ports for you and your families as you plan those next adventures. If you would like to help support our show, you can do so via our Patreon program. You can go to patreon.com/DCL podcast, and you can find out all the information there. We thank each and every one of our Patreon supporters who help bring this show to you each and every week. If you would like to come on our show and talk about some alternative vacations you maybe have planned, or if you have taken some recent vacations that you think that our listeners would enjoy, reach out to me, Steve, at DCLpodcast.com. We'll get you on, and we will talk your adventures and your story. So between now and our next show, on behalf of myself, Steve, and Christy and Chris, all of us here at the DCL Podcast, we'd like to wish you and your families all the best. Stay well out there, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast. The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.